Okay, I'll start. So good day, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and good evening if you're overseas. Welcome to the Private Sector Physics Symposium. This is done in association with the Division for Applied Physics and Instrumentation, as well as Professional Affairs. My name is Ian D'Souza, and I'm the Director of Private Sector Physics at the CAP. I also have a day job in the aerospace sector, and I'd like to take about just 2 minutes to introduce the symposium and say what it's all about and why we're doing it. So this symposium has slowly evolved over a few years of sort of Could I ask everyone to mute their microphones, please? Yeah. So this symposium has sort of slowly evolved over a few years of prototype testing. We've done workshops at the CAP Congress for students on networking and communication skills, as well as we've brought physicists in to do career talks about what they do in their jobs. And we've had people who are working as engineers in startups or who have started startups, machine learning, aerospace, defense. We even had one sort of outlier who's a physicist who's a comedian, stand-up comedian. So we had this sort of idea that a lot of graduates wind up not in academia, and there are other day jobs that you have to start thinking about. Unfortunately today, so we have some things going on today. Unfortunately today too, the talks had to be canceled. They had to cancel. So one was about physics and finance, which I was really looking forward to, but maybe we'll have that brought in some other way at another time, another conference, we'll get to it. So what we've been trying to emphasize is this awareness that most physicists, I think the next talk our plenary session will tell you, maybe about 3/4 will not wind up directly working in academia. And this is a reality that's not often talked about within the university departments. And just to make things, I think, more difficult is that physicists who work in the private sector and the private workforce are often hidden under various job titles, which don't have the word physicist in their title. So this symposium is an effort to sort of bring the situation into our consciousness. And the day will kick off with this theme setting plenary talk, which I'm really looking forward to, by Dr. Crystal Bailey, and followed by a series of talks by physicists who are working not in academia, and so you can see what they do. And at 4 p.m. Eastern time, there will be a panel discussion where we will have a conversation, basically, a conversation about physics and physics jobs, and hear individual stories, and you can ask questions and discuss with them directly. So that's the idea of this symposium, and I'm really looking forward to it. So I'd like to hand off now to Daniel Clough, who will say a few words and then also introduce our exciting plenary speaker. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. So Ian is Director of Private Sector Affairs. I'm the Director of Professional Affairs, and Stefan is in there somewhere too. So the three of us are the organizers of this symposium. And as Ian has said, a lot of us start our careers in a physics department at a university, doing grad study, extra jobs, and that sort of thing. And but then, how many of us end up being a professor or staying on as get a postdoc and then stay on as an associate or something like that? They're not always the best jobs. They're not always good for your career advancement. The other thing I'll say is physicists, when they go out in the private sector, can make a lot more money than you really have started to imagine. Like, not myself, because I'm inventing technology. So we're scrounging for funding from federal sources and so on. But you have such a good training as a physicist that you're so adaptable. And I think that's the big thing that we're trying to make happen here, is for people to understand, because as Ian said, you don't get a job title that says physicist. So what I'm trying to do here is promote the idea of the professional physicist designation that we have with the CAP. And I'll discuss that more during the panel session. If, depending on how things are going, I have a 5 or 7 minute presentation I can give you, depending on how the audience is interested and so on. But Crystal has been doing a lot of work on this, and we're really happy to have her. She's been doing this for several years now. The information that she has at her disposal far outweighs anything I could say. So I'd like to thank Crystal for coming, and you can go right ahead and start your talk.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Daniel and Ian, for that great introduction. And yes, I think you'll be very very, not surprised, but very pleased because what I am going to tell you about in my message completely bolsters everything that you've said. I've got a lot of good statistics and some advice. So the first half of the talk is really going to be kind of setting the stage about what the employment picture is, and then giving you some advice on how to maybe prepare for these kinds of careers. You know, it's absolutely true. Most physicists end up in the private sector. And so therefore many people ask, well, how do I connect with those opportunities? Because my own advisor maybe has no industry connection, has no idea. So there are a lot of things that you can do to help yourself. So I'm going to dive right in. All right. Where do physicists work, right? So we just talked about this. And one thing that really annoys me is that a lot of people will use the phrase traditional physicist to refer to somebody who is a permanent faculty researcher, you know, or that is to say, they'll also refer to somebody who didn't follow that path as non-traditional. And so how do we define a traditional physicist? Are we talking about a physics professor or a PhD researcher? Are we talking about whatever is the most common career path? And by the way, I just want to also say that for the purposes of this discussion, I am framing it as anyone with a physics degree is a physicist. Bachelor's, master's, or PhDs. It's true for chemistry. If you get a bachelor's degree in chemistry, you're a chemist. If you get a bachelor's in engineering, you're an engineer. And I say that you are absolutely a physicist if you have a bachelor's degree in physics and then go into the workforce with that degree. So the AIP, the American Institute of Physics, they have a great statistical research center which publishes tons of great statistics about physics. So if you in the US, but if you want to ever look at that, just go to their website. It's fantastic. They estimate that about 1 in 5 physics bachelors will choose to finish a physics PhD, right? Some will go straight into the workforce, about half. About a third will go into physics and astronomy grad school. Some will leave with a terminal master's. Some will go on to a PhD. Some will go into a master's program in another STEM field. So all told, of 100, physics bachelors that graduate, 100 physicists with a bachelor's degree, 5 will go on to finish their physics PhD. So already we're talking about 20% of physics degree holders and, physicists, by my definition, will actually become physics PhDs. So my point in saying this is defining traditional physicist with the above conditions already doesn't really make sense because we're only talking about a very small collection of physicists to begin with. Now, where do physics graduates go? So as I already mentioned, about 40% of physics graduating bachelors will go into the workforce after graduation. 66% of those graduating physics bachelors will go into the private sector and mostly in STEM fields. You see that that's the largest employment base for those physics bachelors who went straight to work. We got a few in colleges and universities. That was a kind of a small cohort, and they weren't, that certainly wasn't, teaching or academia. That was working, on things with the university and usually in a temporary capacity. And if you look on the right of those ones in the private sector, that's the breakdown of the fields of employment. And just as was already said, I believe by Ian, you see, most of them don't have physics in their title, or that's not their field. They will go into the workforce and work on interdisciplinary teams with graduates from other STEM areas. And employers deliberately make the job titles vague: engineer, developer, analyst. That's the title. But these physics bachelors are still coming into these teams with a very unique skill set that they have because they're physics majors, and they have a very specific role that they play on these teams as physicists. If that was not true, they wouldn't recruit so many physics majors to be on these teams, right? Employers value physicists on these teams. But as was said, your title might be engineer or developer or analyst and not necessarily physicist. Oop. Physics masters. Between 2016 and 2018, 45% of physics masters recipients entered or remained in the workforce. And again, if you look over here, you start to see a pattern of those who went into the workforce. The vast majority went into the private sector. It's not even close. It's like most of them went into the private sector. And then if you look on the right-hand side, again, you see computer science and engineering represented, along with physics or astronomy. Some would have gone, some might be teaching in community colleges, like 2-year colleges. But most of them are going into private sector and in these kind of STEM fields. Now to the PhDs. And again, these are folks who, it's a combination of US citizens and non-citizens, but these are all folks who got their degree in the United States. And as you can see, I loved, just pay attention to the shape of this curve and also the scale. We're, 10 to the 3 here. So of these, about 10% of the US and about 25% of non-US PhD graduates leave the United States, and most of these are for postdoc positions. Sorry, I keep clicking away. In 2018, that translates to about 1,600 of these PhDs actually staying in the US workforce. So that's what that little star means, is that 1,600. 2015 to 2016 is more like 1,500. And then in 2010, about 1,300. So it just is scaling down with that curve. But I just want to kind of give you a sense of where that is. So these are PhDs who remained in the US workforce. Meanwhile, the number of permanent hires in academia has decreased since 2002. And I was recently giving this talk to someone, and then he said, well, I saw that it was increasing recently. Yep, it's increasing from about 240 to about 300. Whereas if you look at the scale on the left, there's no real comparison. So, okay, so I did a little exercise. In 2010, I took the ratio, 2010 new graduates to PhDs conferred, PhDs conferred to the new faculty hires. It was about 19%. Okay, but we know that nobody gets their degree, their PhD, and goes straight to teaching in a university. That's true. Most people go through a couple postdocs. So I said, okay, let's take the 2010 graduates and then compare it to the hires in 2016. The ratio was a whopping 23%. So, I think you're getting the point, which is that it's not the most common career path for physicists. Yeah. So, and this is another way to view it too, which I really like. If you look at the 1,500 PhDs, if you look at that initial employment graph, sometimes you might actually see this, ooh, look at this. Academia is such a huge slice of the initial employment. That academia slice includes all of these temporary positions, postdoc positions, mostly postdocs, assistant professor positions, all kinds of different things that have a built-in expiration date. These are roles for physics PhDs in academia that are only 2 or 3 years by definition. There's very little, there's no benefits, there's no job security, there's no promise that you have a job at the other end of that. If instead of this graph, you actually highlight what are those permanent jobs, those jobs that don't have a built-in expiration date, it looks more like this. So as you can see, clearly the sector that has the most potentially permanent, real sort of jobs for physics PhDs is industry. So, and one other quick thing I'll say is about a quarter of those new US faculty hires were people who got their PhD outside the US. So that's another thing that's going on. Some of these permanent faculty positions are folks who did not get their degree in the US. So they weren't included in that first graph. All told, if you look at the NSF survey of doctoral recipients across all graduation years in the whole population, about 30% of those with a physics PhD in the workforce, and this is not just initial, this is overall time, are in those permanent academic positions. Only about 18% of physics BS graduates will choose to finish a PhD in physics. 5 out of 100 US bachelors will become a traditional physicist, i.e. permanent physics faculty, and over half of them, actually a vast majority of them, will work in a private sector job with a physics bachelor's, master's, or PhD. Okay. And salary. We're talking about salary. So on the left, this is a little bit old data. I apologize. There is more recent data that I haven't had a chance to kind of swap out into this slide. But clearly you can see between those who had master's degrees, though the masters who are working in colleges and universities, as I mentioned previously, those are either, if they're working in a 4-year college, many of them were actually the folks who were running the labs, like keeping the labs supplied, helping teach the courses, stuff like that. So that was the salary range for physics masters in that date range. And then you can see how much higher the earning potential was in the private sector. And then on the right, if you look at the PhDs, the private sector median was above $100,000. So 6 figures right out of the gate. At the university and 4-year colleges, and again, these are starting salaries. So these are going to probably be mostly those temporary, like maybe a lecturer, maybe an assistant professor. And then down here, you have the postdocs. The average starting salary for PhDs in those university or 4-year colleges, 55. I also want to just note that physics bachelors who go into the private sector and work in those STEM fields that I was talking about at the beginning, they earn significantly more than this. Okay. And then the postdocs, it's even slightly more depressing. Those who are in the university postdocs earn less than the government lab. The national lab postdocs earn really well. And then other temporary positions also kind of like in the 40 to 50,000 range. And that is significantly lower than what most physics bachelors who go into those STEM private sector fields earn. All that to say, of course, it's not all about money. We want to discover new things about the universe. Academic jobs can be really rewarding. I would never want to discourage anyone from pursuing an academic career. And I want to say that especially to women and to people of color and people from underrepresented groups. Physics has a dreadful diversity problem when it comes to faculty. And it's great. Science is improved when there are diverse minds working on these problems. And it's extremely rewarding and a great thing to do. So I would never discourage anyone from doing that. Where I think that we defeat our students is we fail to give them additional options. This guy up here, I always call him the rose-colored binoculars. He's looking at this academic career with the expectation that that is the only thing that one can do. And that is, what one should prepare for, when in fact, you can take down those binoculars and see this entire landscape of opportunity around you. And if we're good career mentors, we start showing our students all of these additional options, letting them know that those options are not lesser, they're not other, they're in fact the most common path, and they lead to really well-paying employment, stable employment, and an opportunity to really make an impact in the world through work that you do. So there's a lot of options, and responsible career mentorship means preparing students for a broad range of possibilities. And I feel like a lot of times we have kind of a remedial mindset, like, oh God, my students are going to be graduating in a year. Quick. Somebody tell them the situation and help them write a resume. When, that's a Band-Aid. I feel like physics as a discipline, we actually need to evolve to include this information from the beginning and be showing students how to build these different skills all along the way. So no one's panicking. I think of it like, instead of putting a Band-Aid on the wound, you make them superheroes. And so they just can't be wounded. They're ready for the future. Okay. So those are my stats. So now I'm going to switch gears and give you some actual tips on how to plan for these careers. So the first thing that students need to think about is career planning. We have Peter Fisk, who does a great workshop for us at our March meeting, and he also did a webinar for us that's on our webinar page. You should definitely watch it. It's incredible. But he shows the job search. Most people think it's writing resumes and going to interviews. That's actually the tip of the iceberg. Underneath it, there's a whole, it starts with this broad planning. Understanding yourself, understanding your values, not just your skills and interests. It's networking to discover about different career paths and to kind of organically build your group that can help you out with stuff. And then as you get closer to graduation, then you start to focus on, okay, well, what jobs do I start to apply for? And then the absolute last thing is that tip of the iceberg, actually applying to the jobs. So the self-assessment is key. You need to understand what you love doing as well as what you're good at doing. So I recommend, for one thing, there are a couple of instruments that you can sort of take advantage of, like iSeek, Strong Interest Inventory, and they're designed to help students just get a feel for what they're into. And for the Strong Interest Inventory, basically what they did was they did a questionnaire of a lot of different people working in a lot of different fields and asked them questions, not just about what they did, but who they are as people. And they store those questions in a big database. And then when you take the same test, they do a DNA match. They're like, whose responses were you the most similar to? The thinking being, if you answered similarly to certain groups of people, maybe you're like them and maybe you would like that career path too. And it gives you this kind of list of the top 10 folks that you are the most similar to. That's not telling you this is what you will be or this is what you must do. It is intended to be a way to even just get a starting point for where you might explore careers that aren't professor, the only thing you've ever seen. So these are really great tools. You also want to think beyond the job specifics. Like, do you want to live someplace warm? Do you want to have a flexible schedule? Do you want to be able to spend time with family? Do you want to make a difference in people's lives? I encourage people, as they start to think about this, to take their whole selves into account, not just kind of like, I'm good at programming, I know about nuclear physics, oh, what can I do, right? There's more to it than that. I also strongly recommend that you keep a career journal and document your skills. So in your career journal, to help you with this planning, I encourage you to proceed with the prompt, when have I been the happiest in my experience as a student, right? And write down not just I was, giving a paper, or I was at a conference, or I was, doing a run or doing some data analysis. Think about, were you alone? Were you with other people? What was the subject matter? Was it super analytical, or were you doing writing? Were you communicating? Think about all those aspects. Reflect on when you've been happiest, and even more importantly, when you have been least happy. For example, in a windowless, fluorescently lit room, alone for the 8th hour, when I was nearly electrocuted. That was my low point as a grad student. So think about when you've been happiest and least happy. That will give you some serious insights into kind of like maybe the things that you care about and things you want to avoid. Also, you should every week, if you can, be disciplined. Write down every new skill you have gained that week. And I would recommend even organizing your journal under headers like communication skills, analytical skills, technical skills, programming, building skills, machining skills, whatever they are. Put a header on your section and write down in bullets every single week. This will make your life so much easier when you're actually trying to write resumes. You don't have to sit there and try to remember every single thing you learned over the past 4, 6, 10 years. It's all there in your journal. So be disciplined about that. You'll be doing yourself a favor. Also, a lot of people kind of poo-poo career and campus resources. You know what? They can't really help you find an academic job. That's true. Really, that's a job for your academic advisor. And you know what, gang? Even he or she may not be able to do that, or they may not be able to do that. And so career services can, that test I just mentioned, the Strong Interest Inventory, a lot of times campus career people have a subscription to that. So any student can come in and take it for free. It's a great place to get started learning about all kinds of other things that might be of interest to you. And they can absolutely help you write a good resume. You walk in there with a job description for an industry job, they can help you. They're experts at this. So do take advantage of career services. They're great people and they really want to help you. Also, a word or two about networking. So build your professional network. This is so important. 80% of people get their job through networking. So your first degree contacts are people you know. Peers, colleagues, mentors. folks that you know. Your second degree contacts are everyone that your first degree contacts know. So the second degree contact pool is the magical pool because it's larger and more diverse by definition than your first degree, but it's still navigable. So if you can, discover people who are in your second degree pool who you want to contact, it's just as it's simple to just ask your mutual contact for an introduction. Yeah, like I said, 80% of people get jobs through their second degree connections. So you really need to start exploring that second degree pool. And you may be thinking, well, how on earth do I do that? It turns out LinkedIn is an amazing tool for this. I know a lot of people are skeptical about LinkedIn. Honestly, if there's only one reason you get a LinkedIn account, this is the reason. So in your account, you can go and in the search bar, you can put physics, you can put any keyword you want. Something you're interested in, outreach, writing, physics, whatever. And then you go, make sure it's a people search, and then show all results. And then if you go to that all filters, it'll open up the fancy filter page. On the fancy filter page, you see on the left there, connections, first, second, third plus. I don't recommend the third plus because like getting a friend of a friend of a friend to connect you is like a little awkward, but like second degree is perfect. Click first and second degree connections. Any additional criteria, you can see that you can do location, you can do industries, you can do past companies. There's all kinds of filters. And do that search. Click apply at the top. See who's in that list. Just browse it. Look through there. Look for anyone who's interesting. And then if you find someone who is a second degree connection or a first one, you can just reach out to them directly. But a second degree, you see who your connection is. It's best to just send an email. Send an email to your first degree and say, hey, I noticed on LinkedIn that you're connected to so-and-so. Could you do an introduction for me? I'd love to meet them. That is a great way to kind of, get connected to people who are in this magical sort of second degree pool. Also, a couple tips for building your network in person, right? At some point, perhaps this year, you may find yourself at an actual meeting or a social event or some sort of thing. Networking is not engaging in endless banter. I think a lot of, especially physicists, when they hear that word networking, they think business cards, martinis, Oh, I see a thumbs up. That's nice. No. Networking is a skill. You don't have to be a social butterfly. You don't have to be super engaging. You don't have to have any sort of inherent qualities to do it successfully. You're all very clever people who've learned a lot of skills. This is a skill you learn just like any other skill. All networking is speaking to as many people as you can about exactly two things: who you are, what you want. And I think that a lot of physics students actually feel, I don't know, maybe there's some cultural things happening too. They feel like it's rude to be kind of like direct, but if you're at a networking event, I've had students come up to me and sort of like, hi. And then there's just like, we introduce ourselves and there's just like this long pause. And I'm like, I'm there because I know you're going to want information from me or ask me for something. Like, that's why we're there, right? And so don't be bashful. I mean, when you meet someone, hi, nice to meet you. So I know you're head of careers at APS, and I was wondering if you could give me advice on blah. Or say you don't know who I am necessarily, but you come up to me, it's like, hi, my thing when I was a grad student, I would have come up and said, hi, my name's Crystal Bailey. I'm a graduate student at Indiana University. I'm really interested in careers in physics education research, even though my background is in nuclear physics. That would have been enough information to start a conversation with somebody. So be clear on what you want to get from the networking interaction, whether it's to learn about a field, to meet people, to ask about jobs, to figure out, what's going on in different companies, and be direct. Just be direct. It's fine. It's not rude. It's actually less awkward than just kind of standing there, silently, not saying anything. And there's no designated place to do it, y'all. I have met people on planes who are physicists. A woman who gave one of our career workshops, it's a long story, but she basically was able to hire someone for a really hard to fill position in a tech company because she had a conversation with her stylist, her hairstylist. She was just talking about this position they needed to fill. And the stylist was like, oh, that's funny. I have another client who just moved to the area. It sounds like they have the same background. They put them in touch and they ended up hiring this person. So actually be prepared to do it anywhere, especially as you're getting closer and you want to get more focused in your job search. Talk to everybody. You want to convey what you want. And so if you've done this self-assessment process, I also say develop a pitch. I said it was a skill that can be learned. Do figure out ahead of time a pitch. And what I mean by that is what I just gave was my 10-second pitch. I'm a grad student and I'm interested in physics education careers. Develop a longer one, maybe a 30-second or a minute one. And I would also say develop a version of your pitch of who you are. Do one that's relevant for peers and other physicists. Do one that your grandmother could understand. Because again, the person you're sitting next to in the plane might be the CEO of, the tech company you really want to get into, but they themselves are not a physicist. And if you start rambling jargon about they're not going to understand what you're talking about. So prepare one or two versions of at least one of your pitches, one that your average person would understand. Take advantage of these existing resources. So again, some of us are still in lockdown and that's very sad and depressing, but soon we'll be able to get out of that. So when you go, APS or, CAP, go to your professional society meetings, go to social events, go to job fairs, go to the exhibit hall, talk to all the employers that are in the exhibit hall. Some of them are there to sell the product, but some of them are the physicists that actually design the product, so they can talk to you about jobs in their organization. The more contacts you make, the more connections there are, and the more connections you make, the more opportunities will open up. Okay, now you've made some contacts. Now what do? The next thing you do, once you've actually made these contacts with people, do informational interviews, okay? Informational interviews are your secret weapon for gaining insight into specific career paths. I can tell you what I know. Your professor can tell you what they know. But none of us know a job better than someone who's actually in that job. If you really want to understand what is it like to be X, go find somebody who's doing X and talk to them. So in an informational interview, 30 minutes, talk to somebody from any industry or company of interest. You can, like I said, go through LinkedIn, professional networks. The beautiful thing about informational interviews is you get to ask the questions. It is not on any level a job interview. And please don't actually go in there kind of angling for a job, because of the person who agreed to meet with you, that's not what they signed up for. They signed up to give you information about them and about their company and about what they do. But do bring a paper copy or a card. If you want to bring a copy of your CV or your kind of tech resume, and so you could leave it with them, if you're meeting in person, or send them a link to your LinkedIn profile if you're meeting electronically, because they might actually store that information and say, wow, that was a great conversation. And in a couple months, maybe they will have an opening and maybe they will get in touch with you. At an absolute minimum, you're going to get great information about that path. And you're probably going to be able to add that person to your professional network if the conversation goes well. So it's really valuable. Sorry. So yeah, do informational interviews. Also, CVs and resumes. So most people don't know the difference, okay? CVs are comprehensive, exhaustive listings of every experience or product in your professional lifetime. A resume is a short, succinct document containing only the skills, this is so important, only the skills and experience relevant to the job in question. The resume is literally a function of the job description. I have people ask me, give me advice on my resume. I say, great, show me the job description. Does not exist without the job description. So that's super, super important. There are no page limits on CVs. It's a static document, more or less. You'll add to it, after all your conferences and whatever. And it's every professionally relevant thing. Degrees earned, positions held, presented, publicly, blah, 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 As I said, resumes, 1 page, absolutely no more than 2. You will write a different one for every job application. And a lot of people, when they are told that, their mind blows up because they're like, how can I possibly represent myself and all of my great skills and qualities and everything to an employer with a 1-page document? Again, Peter Fisk has the perfect saying, the purpose of the resume is to get you the interview, not the job. And this document is there just to get you over that first cut. For these jobs, they get 100 applications. Probably about 70 of them are people who have not read the job description, don't have any of the skills. There's a bunch of stuff that they have to cut out. They need you to indicate very clearly that you have the skills they're looking for to get you into that conversation. And that's where you can represent all the other wonderful things that you bring to the table to the employer, who you're actually going to be working for. And a lot of people ask, I'll talk about this in a second. Sorry. When do I write a CV versus a resume? National labs have very similar hiring practices to academic jobs. So if you want an academic job or a national lab job, talk to an academic or national lab scientist. They will tell you what's involved. It's a CV. It's a lot of emphasis on your publications, research, stuff like that. Everything else, industry, skills-based resume. That's what you want to write. How do I write a good one? I don't have time to go into like the deep instructions here, but I did do a video tutorial that you can go.aps.org/physics resume. You can even Google APS resume, I think, or physics resume. I think it's the first YouTube link that comes up. It's like a 5-minute video. It'll show you everything. If you do want advice on how to write an academic CV, again, I'm not the person to go to. Hopefully you have a phalanx of academics who will help you with that around you. But UC San Francisco does have a really good thing on that, like how you put together your packet for faculty positions. General advice, and that's a little Tower of Babel on the right. Communication skills are important both virtually and in person. And what I mean by that is, first and foremost, you need to actually be able, you want to make sure that what you're saying is meaningful to the person you're saying it to. That's like the rule. But, you don't want to use jargon if there's any reason to think that person doesn't know what those things mean. If you're not sure, ask them. It's not rude. Have you heard of an, NMR? Like, do you know what nuclear magnetic resonance is? Or, have you done a field probe? Like, you can ask them. They'll tell you. And you need to be ready to say in other different words, it made a map. So shape your communication, be direct, and give the most relevant information first. This resume thing is another example of almost journalistic writing. You are leading with the most important details, and you're not flooding people with lots of irrelevant stuff. Okay, so I'm going to start wrapping up, but I want to share with you a few resources that we have. And the beautiful thing, we'd love for you to be APS members, of course, but almost everything we offer, you don't have to be an APS member. It's free and open to everybody. So we have the Shape Up email series, which we recently launched, and you can subscribe to weekly professional challenges. And so there's a career exploration one, job search, interview process, and shaping up your professional image. And basically, if you sign up for this, you get a series of 5 or 6, no more, weekly emails that are just like little prompts, like, have you updated your skills this week? Have you scheduled an informational interview? Just little things to kind of prompt you. So that's one thing you can take advantage of. And the APS Online Professional Guidebook is another great resource. All of these topics, this entire talk, there's a self-assessment, networking, interviewing, all of that is on our online professional guidebook. So if you go to aps.org/careers, you can access those resources there. Whoops. Also, we just launched a new thing last year, the APS Careers Guide. There's a 2020 and a 2021. And this was produced in partnership with IOP, the Institute of Physics over in the UK. Great profiles of physicists working in a whole variety of different career paths. There are career and professional development analysis articles. We did a really cool feature on Black in Physics Week, which was a very exciting event that happened last year. Our national mentoring community is it's great. It's a community of practice around effective mentoring, particularly for students from underrepresented minoritized groups. So if you're interested, if there are faculty listening who want to learn some great skills and get resources on how to mentor students well, it's an amazing community. Join them. They're great. And there's also an employer directory. 10 minutes, go. An employer directory that tells you the companies and organizations that are hiring physicists. So it's a really, really great resource. And when I say free to all members, they're free to everybody. We sent it out to our members, but if you're not a member, you don't have, there's nothing blocking you. Just go go.aps.org /careers guide, and you'll be able to get the digital version. We have thousands of copies also at our building. And again, if we ever go back to meetings, we'll be giving those out too. But there's the digital edition. Also, we just wrapped up the Success in Industry Careers series. So, we just talked about all the, that there are skills that are really important to an industry career, communication skills, leadership skills, all these things. But it's often hard to kind of know, what does that actually look like in practice? So this was a series of webinars that just ran from October of last year through May of this year. Topics like teamwork in industry, what is IP? How does IP work? What are different sort of industry careers that you can pursue? Those are all on our YouTube channel. You could probably Google APS industry YouTube, and it would come up. But if you go to our website, go.aps.org/APS webinars, you can sign up for our mailing list and also view all of our webinar archives. Just click on the tab that says Industry Careers. And I'm very pleased to say, in July of this year, we are launching Working in the U.S. Career Development for International Physicists. This is a specific webinar series targeted to the concerns of non-citizens who are trying to work in the United States. And so we have a lot about work authorizations, OPT, H-1B, visas, stuff like that. So it might be of interest to you. Go check it out. So the way you can make sure you learn about our upcoming broadcasts, if you go to that URL, click sign up, and make sure you check at the bottom the webinar series that you want to receive more information about, and you'll get an email directly to your inbox that we're doing those webinars. Really quick, the APS Impact Program. This is Industry Mentoring for Physicists program. This one you do need to be an APS member to access. But you log in, you can look through the database of all available mentors. These are folks who are in industry, who are enthusiastic about helping mentees. So, go in there, do a search, find somebody who's interesting, connect with them, and they'll help you. They can answer questions better than I can, but it's a great resource. Lastly, I'll say the APS Job Board and job fairs. So APS, our job board, is actually a shared jobs database. So Physics Today, IEEE Computing, American Vacuum Society, all these different societies pool their jobs into the same database. So if you come to the APS job board as a job seeker, you're going to see all of those jobs from all those organizations in the same database. It's free for job seekers. You do not have to be an APS member. You can store multiple versions of your resumes. You maybe have different kinds of jobs that you're sort of, going for, and apply straight through the site. So, and if you're an employer, if you post on our job board, it will be visible to job seekers looking through all of those portals. So, check it out. It's a good resource too. Okay, I'm going to wrap up and just say as a closing remark, the key thing you need to be doing, right? Most of you will not end up in a permanent academic career, and that's wonderful. A thing to be celebrated. So many great opportunities out there for you, but you need to plan effectively, start early, broaden your focus, think about who you are and what interests you, and use that time to really explore in a meaningful way what are the different career paths that are out there, and to build a network of folks who can really help you, connect with opportunity. And then when it comes time for you to actually apply for those jobs and try to get those jobs, make sure that you write a skills-based resume, connect the dots between, what they're looking for and what skills you're bringing to the table, and try to be as clear and concise with your communication as you can. And please take advantage of our resources on our website. It's been a pleasure talking to you all today. And that's all I have. So I'd be happy to take questions if there's time.
Fantastic. So everyone, you can unmute yourself now, and you can even go ahead and clap, which I think is perfect. Thank you very much. Well done. First of all, thank you for pointing out the APS resources. I strongly encourage every CAP member to go have a look, especially those, you can be in your 40s and be looking for a different career path. So don't think this is just for all the youngins. Another important thing that came up was you are a professional when you graduate. And that is something, so as soon as I graduated with my degree in physics, I started off in business, by the way. So you see what can happen when you go to university. So my chairman said, you're a professional now. And no one had ever said that to us up to that point. And it's true. As soon as you graduate with a bachelor's degree, you're a physicist. You're not necessarily working in a job as a physicist. And the other thing I think that was important is, so we do have reciprocity agreements with APS. A lot of it's free, but if you do want to join and you're a member of the CAP, I think there's a cheaper pathway that might be available to you if you take a look at it. So now I noticed there were some questions coming up in the chat, but a lot of them I think actually got answered by other people.
Daniel, there's a couple of questions on people with their hands raised, 3 of them at least.
Yeah, well, okay, so Maud, I can't see that, but can you go ahead and just, what's the name of the person or anyone?
Yes, Robert Mann is first.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for it was a very professional, stimulating presentation, a lot of good advice, but
that was yesterday, 2 days ago, actually.
Okay. Sorry, who's speaking? Am I speaking or?
Yeah, Bob Mann. Sorry, Bob, you're speaking.
Go ahead,
okay,
Robert.
Thank you. Very nice, but I have 2 comments. One is, I think there is a significant, I'm not sure what to word, maybe occupational bias in terms of both the personality types of people that generally go into the discipline and of the mentality of people that train them. Namely, I know how to train people to be academics, but I don't know how to train people to be something else. And I think that is very much the norm. So that's one significant problem. The other, I'm going to steal from the previous speaker, Jim Peebles. I'm not complaining about the messenger, but I have a bit of a complaint about the message, is that all the statistics are from the United States. Do we have any comparable statistics for this country? And that's maybe not something you could answer, Crystal, but it's out there for anybody.
Yeah. Well, if I may, so I'd like to respond to the first thing. And you're right. Unfortunately, I don't know what is available in terms of stats for Canada and a lot of other societies. I would think it would be the purview of a professional society, but a lot of different disciplines are all, people treat the statistics differently. Like if you look at engineering fields, they make you pay like $500 for their report, which is bananas, if you ask me. So anyway, but I will respond to your first point, which is absolutely, I understand it is true that faculty don't know what to, sort of tell students. I mean, that's why I exist. It's why the work I do exists. So all of the resources that we build are created specifically so that you can share them directly with your students. You can direct them to our webinar series. You can direct them to the careers guide that I just showed. It gives a lot of information. You can direct them. And this is really my point. You don't have to do it yourself. You shouldn't do it yourself. Students can do some of this work themselves. I mean, they can do their own informational interview. Only they can actually do that self-assessment of what is actually important to them. They can do that work themselves. They should do it themselves, and they can make connections, talk to mentors, do that networking. What you can do is be aware of how you may be unconsciously giving them the message that if they don't want to do exactly what you do, that they're lesser and that they're other. And
that's a good point, but I can tell you almost everybody that does research physics thinks that.
Well, that's your problem.
I mean,
Sorry.
Right? It's if they didn't want to do it, they'd be doing something else, right?
I understand, but I'm really serious here because there is an aspect of this that pertains to two really important topics that I will share right now. So we just did a webinar series, a joint webinar series with the American Chemical Society, American Geophysical Union, and a couple of biomedical engineering societies. An Academy's report just came out on mental health of graduate students. Okay, and it was unexpected, but amazing, because a huge component of part of what graduate students are experiencing as a major mental health challenge is feeling like their whole selves and who they are and what they actually want. And in many cases, that is a career that is not exactly like the ones they see from their academic advisors. They're not being heard. They're not being listened to. They're being made to feel that what they want is wrong and that they're wrong for wanting it. And that is actually a major contributor to the problems they're experiencing with mental health. So if I can give you the link to that webinar and that study, and if you want to share it with your colleagues and say, listen, this is really important. The second piece is more diverse students are starting to come to college. And those students do have different priorities. And that's not to say, and I want to be really, really clear on this message, it is not to say that students, people of color, students from underrepresented groups, it's not to say that they don't also feel a sense of wonder and want to discover things about the universe. They do. That's something that everybody who's interested in physics shares. But one key difference is that those who are advising them might have different priorities for them. It's true, actually. We just did the team up report on why there's so low representation of these folks in physics. And having a stable job, having a job that pays well, and most importantly, this is actually super important, having a job that allows them to give back to their community and make a difference in the world and have a social impact is vitally important to this cohort. And if physics departments keep on with this culture and it's an incredibly privileged perspective that you can it's fine to spend your entire life just pursuing knowledge for the sake of knowledge and not to care about those gross things like money and stability of a job. That's a super privileged perspective. And if physics departments keep normalizing that, we're going to keep having these issues. And I challenge anyone to tell me, to find a dean who is like, I'm okay with that. No, I mean, even though it's not only because it's the right thing to do, but universities do not support that. So if physics faculty if your culture of your department is such that, well, this is fine, we just want to keep doing what we're doing, there's two really compelling reasons not to.
Thanks for your comments.
Sorry, I'm just like, I get fired up about it.
So this is a pet peeve that I have. I put it this way: this is an elitist attitude that if you're not doing gravitation or quantum mechanics or working on LEGO or snow or something like that, you're not actually part of the physicist club. And there's a lot of us, like I've been working on climate change for 30 years. I think it's pretty relevant. So you got to feel like what you're doing is relevant. But the other thing is, it's actually physics. You're a physicist.
Yeah, I think a lot of physicists have abandoned the middle, like the middle scale. Yeah. So the frontiers seem to be at the Planck scale or at the cosmological scale, and they've forgotten that the middle is really difficult, like the macro scale.
Well, if I could jump in here, since I raised it, I think they do that because we revere the figures that promote that. They get the greatest level of prominence in talks, at conferences, everything.
Well, yeah, it is hard. Agreed. Like I came from snow, so I was part of the particle physics club, and it's hard to compete with particle physics. There's just so many people. So having this many people appear at our conference is really a step forward. We've never had over 90 people attend a lecture, ever. So this is part of the issue. If you look at the statistics, what happened there? There's more physicists going into engineering than quantum mechanics. There's more, how many physicists are going into computer science? You see those as valid skill set. It didn't take too much for me to become an engineer. I had to do 2 tests. One of them that was never going to happen, so I had to take a course in geology because there's not a hope ever that I'm going to pass a test in geology. But that's what the kind of pathways that we're trying to advise our colleagues of. And the age is not a barrier either. I became an engineer after I was 40. So just don't even think about it at all. Your skill set is remarkable in terms of what you can do. You just may not realize that at day one when you graduate.
So there's another question, I guess, from, I don't know who the name is. It's M. Patku. Do you have a question? You have your hand raised? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, thanks. I thought we were out of time. Crystal, thank you so much. I was the annoying guy giving you thumbs up. I know how hard it is to, not be able to see people. So thanks very much.
I saw you and I appreciate it. I really did. I was like, oh, someone's listening. Like it's yeah.
Quick question. I mean, so physics, I see as a way to develop these skills, like you talked about the resume and this sort of thing. And we have great skills. Everyone agrees to that. This whole career seeking discovery, how much credit in a course do you think would be is that a reasonable thing? Or is that now, oh, wait, no, that's not allowed. What do you think?
So I'm so glad you asked that question. And because, okay, I can't give you a simple, quick answer to that, but my passion project, the thing that I am the most passionate about is I was involved in a project. We just wrote our report. I'm going to put the link in the chat so you see it. It's the pipeline report. And I think we kind of suffered from a branding issue when we first kind of debuted this because we called it Physics, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship Education. And people saw the word entrepreneurship and they thought, but it's so much more than that. Basically, what we're proposing and what we have worked on is developing some ideas of physics curricula that integrate completely these kinds of skills, knowledge, mindset that I've been talking about. It's not a deal where you teach the physics and then you don't teach this part of the physics because you got to teach this thing instead. It's actually seamlessly integrated into the physics that you are learning. And my favorite example, I love this. This was at Loyola University, Maryland is where this was developed. It was an introductory physics course using kind of Elon Musk's Hyperloop concept. If you've heard about the Hyperloop, it's like a train that goes really fast. So it starts with basic kinematics, like, starting here, if you're going this distance at X amount of speed, how long does it take? And then it has them work on what if it starts and stops, how much time is added. So they're learning kinematics, right? But it also incorporates, when it asks the question about, it accelerates, it doesn't tell them how fast. It says, how long would it take if it accelerates at a comfortable acceleration? Which is actually the kind of comfort with open-ended, not quite sure what the answer is thinking that physics students are famous for in these companies. That's why we're hired. So you build in that, and then you go from there, and there's even like, okay, well, what are some human desirability? Okay, so you got one solution is you've got this train going, and instead of having it stop, there's a loop another train that comes on a loop and it meets up with the train and then it goes back and picks up more passengers, right? What if that goes wrong, like the loading over? So it leads you through thinking about both technical feasibility and human desirability. So that's one example, but there are a lot of things there. So before, I know we're out of time, I'm going to epic.aps.org, the EPIC report, Educating Physicists for Impactful Careers. Click on Pi Library. That will show you where all of those curricular materials are. And it's just a start. It's a nascent community who are working on this, but what they've developed is really exciting. So I hope that gives you some inspiration.
Well, Okay, so this has all been informed. We are over time. I'd like to try to do one more question if it can be quick and just give everyone a warning and get Melissa to get ready for her talk. Okay. Well, I can't see anything. So if you have a question, pipe up now or forever hold your peace. Okay, well, if that's the case, then look, this has been a really good discussion. We'll carry this on in the panel. And if everyone could just thank Crystal for a fantastic lecture, I would be happy to hear that. Live clap. That's what we got to have.
Thank you.